Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining. Welcome from whatever part of the world you are watching from, whatever time you are watching from. I hope that you and your family are healthy and safe in this crazy world that we're living in now. Lots of people changing their plans, either thinking to apply to business school or not to apply to business school based on changes in their life. And so I hope everything is well with you and yours. I'm really excited to talk to you today about five of my I'm going to call them favorite business schools beyond the top 15. I often say I have MBA crushes on these schools that I've gained through working with clients, finding a great safety school for them that they fell in love with and then decided to attend and have had great success. So why don't we jump right in? My name is Melissa Prevost. I'm an admissions counselor with Stratus. Before I went to business school at Haas, and post Haas, I actually never lived in the Bay Area. So I was an alumni interviewer for the different parts of the world that I've lived in. Loved actually meetings with students and often found that there was a nugget of information in my interview that I wasn't able to get to. And I'd try and ask questions and get around so that I could get a piece of information. Wanted to hop on the other side of the table and help them. So I became an admissions counselor so that I could help do that. My favorite part is helping people bring their best story out, finding a program that they can get really excited about, whether it's a stretch, a target, or a safety school. A little bit about my background there. I've worked across consulting, strategy, education, nonprofit. So end up working with a lot of engineers, consultants, and those from non-traditional backgrounds. What is Stratus Admissions? So, a couple things that I think are unique about us. Lots of great consulting firms out there. We have a team-based approach, which we think is important because admissions is made up of multiple people. And so we think it's important to have multiple points of feedback on your application. And then if you are applying, so if anyone is planning for next year, if you're applying in the first round, we have our 4-school guarantee, which is if you apply with us to 4 schools and don't get an acceptance into any of those schools, then we'll work with you on another 2 for free. That's only within the first round. So I know we probably have people thinking about second round, maybe even into the spring for third, but in case you're planning out for round 1 of next year and are super organized. So today, I want to talk about, why is it important to think beyond the top 15 programs, and just reacquaint everyone with how admissions teams are going to evaluate you so that you can establish your competitiveness. And then we're going to talk about the 5 C's of how you can help find the right program for you within. And again, I've got 5 programs that I'm going to highlight that are beyond the 15, but I think you can use these characteristics as you're thinking through what might be the right program for you as well. Then we can talk about how Stratus can help. So why beyond the top 15? Most people go to business school to make a career change, to move their career along, improve their network, change locations. Sometimes there's lots of reasons that people come back to business school, and there are so many amazing programs that are out there. I think it is most important to have a wide range of schools. And when I say range, I mean a couple stretch schools, a couple safety schools, a couple target schools. When next year is absolutely the right year for you to go to an MBA. I work with some clients who they're young in their career. They want to shoot for the stars. They don't want to leave their career unless they're getting into a top program. And then I work with people that know that next year is the right year for them, and so they want to make sure that they have a solid acceptance, hopefully with some funds attached, and we'll talk about that as well within the next year. And those might be if you've plateaued in your current role, and so this is really the right time for you to make a transition. You're ready to pursue a new passion. Maybe you've had a personal passion all along, and now is really with COVID, there's a lot of disruption happening. A really interesting time to be in business school around so many industries, but the ones that jump to mind for me: healthcare, education. there's just retail, home delivery, right? There's so much disruption going on. It's a really exciting time to be thinking about the innovation that's going to drive us forward. Maybe you want or need to move to a new location. Maybe you have a partner in another city that you want to get closer to. Maybe it's family you want to get back to. That this is the right year for you. And you want to think around how do you find a school beyond the top 15? Because for safety schools, many people need to reach beyond the top 15. How do you find a school that you can get really excited about and is going to help you move on to that next career step? So we're going to walk through, again, what I called the 5 C's on how to find a school that you can be excited about with your career path. And before we jump into that, I just want to review how an admissions team is going to evaluate your application. So just to make sure that everybody's kind of on the same page. And the reason this is important is because it helps you assess your competitiveness when you're looking at the average class profile of any school. And again, I'll highlight some class profiles as we go through. So first on how does admissions build a class? So you can think about building a class a little bit like building a company, right? Admissions, so if you're building a company, you can't have all marketing people. You can't have all finance people. You can't have all HR people or operations people or tech people. You need a balance across to have a successful organization. So admission teams are looking for diversity of industry coming in, gender, geography, ethnicity, racial background. So schools are really looking for kind of diversity across all of these avenues. So the 5 criteria that schools are looking for are kind of your quantitative readiness. So, how did you do in an undergrad, or if you had a master's, as going into the application process, your undergraduate GPA, and also the quantitative kind of rigor of your current role. So I was just on a webinar with a school yesterday who was highlighting that, the quantitative rigor of a role can be good fodder for showing your quantitative ability as well. Second is your professional experience and global exposure. So the middle 80% range for business school is 3 to 8 years. Most schools will have a couple, 10% below and 10% above. There are fewer people applying in those buckets, so there's fewer people that end up in programs in those buckets as well. But where do you fall on that years of experience? And the reason having generally around 3 years of experience is important is so that you have had enough work experience that you can bring to the classroom discussion to really offer your perspective as well as learn. So it's a give and take throughout that whole process. The third is leadership and community involvement. So what type of leadership roles have you been able to hold within your career or outside in the community? Often at 3 years, it's difficult to have, manage a team per se, which is why leadership can often come out of your community involvement. So were you able to lead a conference for, an industry group that you're involved in? Do you mentor with younger children or do tutoring, and have you been able to develop some new ways of reaching people, especially during COVID? Again, there's been a lot of opportunity for new ideas, and to be able to lead an idea, lead a project from within, from a project management standpoint. The fourth is recommendations. So can your recommenders or will your recommenders talk about you are ahead of your peers? Can they give examples of how you work with people, how that you have leadership potential? And then the fifth is your essays and short answers, and kind of within this is a little bit of your career goals, which is where we're going to jump in a second, is our first C. But really, you are compared across these criteria to other like individuals. So for example, a male Indian engineer is not going to be competing with a female nonprofit based in the US. There are two different buckets. So you are competing against other people with other similar demographics. So you want to figure out how you can stand out and find a program that is going to help you get to your career goals. So let's jump into our first C, career goals. So the way I'm going to walk through this is talk a little bit about the C and then talk about a profile of someone who I worked with who is successful at the school, and then go a little bit more into kind of the details of that school and why I think who might be interested in looking at that school. So it's important for you to articulate for yourself and for admissions what your career goals are and why an MBA is going to help you get there. So, for example, you want to work towards a statement like, I want to be a product manager at a consumer-facing tech company like Amazon, so that long-term I can work at a small to medium tech firm as a chief product officer. So, the specificity on your short-term goal is more important. Long-term, as we know, the world is changing quite a bit. It has changed a lot in the last year. Who knows what will happen in this next year? You need to be able to show directionally that your first step, your short-term goal, is going to lead you to your long-term goal. And the reason this is important is in finding the right program for you beyond the 15 is this is a little bit like a gap analysis, right? So you bring a group of skills to the table and you have a career that you want to be in post MBA, and then you need to define what the MBA is going to do for you in order to help you be successful. And what you are going to gain from you're actively going to gain. The MBA is not just going to give it to you. You have to be an active part of this process, obviously. But admissions teams are looking for, have you done that assessment? If your goal statement is not clear enough, it's difficult for them to understand whether or not they think their program can help you be successful in your long-term career. And also, if admissions team doesn't see that the short-term goal is going to lead you to the long-term goal, and maybe it is, you just need to be able to explain that. If it's not apparent through the story, it's explaining what insight you have into that industry that's going to help that happen. So let's talk through. So Emory is going to be the first school that I talk about. I worked with a client recently. She had an emoji in her email that I put here that somehow bumped up to the top there. But she lived on the West Coast. She went to a UC school undergrad, had a kind of low 300 GRE, and really project management background, really wanted to go into consulting. So we were looking for schools that would fit for her to help her move into consulting. That was really kind of, again, people have many reasons for going back to business school. Hers was she wanted to move into consulting. So we were looking at schools that were going to help her get into consulting. And Emory is a school that is very strong in consulting. So you can read the stats here and obviously do research on the class profile. But one of the things that I think stand out about Emory are the outgoing industries. So 50% of their class go into consulting. And 22% of their class go into marketing. So, things that you would want to consider potentially if your long-term goal is to go into consulting, Emory is a fantastic program to look at. If you want to go into marketing, where the marketing tie is Atlanta is a growing center for kind of headquarters. There's, I think they're third ranked for Fortune 1000 companies headquarters, and have over 200 small private firms that are growing in Atlanta. It's really the center of the Southeast from an industry perspective. So it's a growing city. I've got in there niche rated number 19 for young professionals to live. Interestingly enough, Emory is also, out of the programs that I'm profiling, the only one that has a one-year program. So where that might play in is if you maybe have a business degree from another country, or a master's that ties to business, and you want to use an MBA to come to the U.S. or transition into the U.S. A one-year program may be something that is interesting to look at, because you've got some of the business skills coming in, and then use that one-year program to leverage into consulting, into a marketing role through Emory. And just so I can get through this, I want to make sure that we leave time for questions at the end. So please feel free to populate them in the chat, but we'll make sure that we hit the questions at the end. All right, so the next C is culture. Why? This is, what type of environment do you want to learn in? Are you looking for a smaller culture, a larger culture? Are you looking for a culture that is really based around technology and innovation? Are you looking around a culture that's built around consulting and experiential learning, or potentially sustainability? And do you see sustainability really built into the culture of the program and the courses? Another piece might be collaborative or competitive. So here I want to highlight Tepper, Carnegie Mellon, based in Pittsburgh. So this client was a systems analyst. She went to also a UC school. I didn't realize that when I put that together. She was kind of mid threes in her GPA and low 600s in her GMAT. So she was looking for different options that would help her move into a product management role within the same industry. So she wanted to stay in her industry, but really move out of the systems analyst piece into more of a product management role. And she really wanted to go to school that would value her tech background, and was, because the UC school she went to was so large, was looking for a program that would be smaller and really allow her to get to know her teachers and her professors. And so she chose Tepper. And some of the things that I think are key differentiators here are kind of the base of technology at Tepper. So looking at the kind of outside of the employment stats that are here, 28% of the class. So Carnegie Mellon is based in Pittsburgh. So you can note from the bottom bullet if you didn't know that. And we'll come back to Pittsburgh, but from Pittsburgh, 28, so almost 30% of the class goes out west, and about 30% of the class stays in the Northeast. So it is a arguably Midwestern / Northeast school, depending upon what side of Pennsylvania you're on. But it really has a strong tie to the West Coast. They are also known for their small class and the intimacy of the relationships that you can build with your professors. So they have a 1-to-5 student to professor ratio. So it's really, and there's a lot of collaborative. Most programs are focused on collaboration. At Tepper, the collaboration, while it is very true among students, it's also really evident across students and professors. They have the Schwartz Center for Entrepreneurship. Pittsburgh is another growing city that you've got Uber, it's a little different now, but Duolingo, lots of small startups are starting in Pittsburgh, primarily because of Carnegie Mellon, which is kind of number 4 from an engineering school for undergraduates, or engineering overall. And then you have the business school layered on top. So there's a lot of collaboration between engineering and the engineering and the business school. And I just had a quote from a VC that says, Pittsburgh is at the top of our list when we explain why we are investing outside of Silicon Valley. And this is Chris Olson from Drive Capital. The region has incredible founders, talent, and world-class research institutions. Companies like Duolingo, Gecko Robotics, Fifth Season are now proving that the region has raw ingredients to build the next generation of great companies. So there are VCs that are looking at Tepper and Pittsburgh in general, and that's really tied to Tepper for investments in the future. So, really you should be looking at an investor report. In 2019, there was about $3 billion that was invested in Pittsburgh startups. So again, entrepreneurial, a lot of tech entrepreneurial going on there. So, Tepper is a great school to think about if you like working closely with your professors and really value that relationship, if you want to transition into tech or consulting, and if you like a smaller working environment where you are going to be kind of working very closely in a smaller knit group. All right, the third C, community. So I tie community a little bit to location. Where do you want to be? Is there a part of the country that you want to transition to? Is there a, do you want to be in the city? Do you prefer to be outside of a city? Do you like hanging out with people that are kind of jeans and t-shirt, maybe shorts and t-shirt, depending upon the time of the year, or khakis and a button down? So all of this can kind of talk about the community in which you are learning. And so with community, I want to focus on Foster, University of Washington. So I had two different clients that, and I'll talk about both of them because they're a little bit different, but both of the goal for both of these clients were moving to the West Coast. And in particular, for both of them, it was Seattle because of the tech hub that Seattle is. So this client here, she was actually Russian and had, so she had worked for a large, well-known technology company in Russia and transitioned to the US. And was living in the southeast of the US, but really looking for an MBA to help move her up towards on the West Coast, ideally specifically Seattle. And I worked with her a couple of years ago. She is currently working at Amazon, so made that transition kind of through her experience at Foster. Another client who was in engineering manufacturing in the Midwest. Again, really looking, he wanted to move into a product management role in fintech. And so he's actually still at Foster now, spent a summer at CBRE and kind of really looked to his MBA program to help him change kind of location. So Foster overall, why should you consider Foster? We talked about Tepper being a focus on technology. Foster is on another school. 53% of their class graduates into technology. One of the things that I think is really cool about their curriculum is they have an applied strategy project, which is true. Many schools have experiential learning projects similar to this, but they're tied with the local companies. And if you think of the local companies that are in Seattle, you've got Microsoft, you've got Starbucks, you've got Amazon, you've got Boeing. So there's a large number for the size of the city that it is. There's a lot of companies that you look to and are excited about working with Foster students in kind of projects that they're working on. So talking about niche rating, Seattle is actually number 4 on that rating list. So, a great place to live. Spent a summer there and there was a lot more sun than my friend that I was visiting. I was like, I think this whole rains all the time thing is maybe not true. But he kept telling me that it was, saying, shh, don't tell anybody. So reasons that you would want to consider Foster is, moving to the West Coast. 70% of their graduates right now stay in Washington. Again, that's primarily because of the draw of the companies that are based around Foster. If you want to work in or change to technology, as you can see, the incoming degrees were business, engineering, and humanities. So engineering tied to technology, obviously, but many people use foster or leverage foster or look to foster for transitioning into technology because of the ties that they have into the technology industry, both from a location as well as kind of ties to companies' perspective. And another benefit, I think, is the smaller class. If you're looking for an intimate environment where you're going to get to know people really well across your class, Foster is a great program to consider. All right, so clubs, another way to get to know a program, or there's so much that you learn in a business school program outside of the classroom. I've alluded to experiential learning opportunities a couple times. Looking for and understanding the clubs that are offered at a school can really give you insight into where students are putting their time, and where that school has ties both to industry as well as a lot of innovation. So things to think about is, what clubs at a school might you be excited to get involved in? There's kind of two ways to look at it. Are you interested in being innovative and entrepreneurial within the business school that you go to? And so, you might look for a school that if you want to go into nonprofit, you might look for a school that doesn't have as strong of a nonprofit program so that you can build that. Now, on the flip side, if you are looking for a school that is established in an area, then you may look to have clubs that are going to help support you in establishing those connections. So, on the entrepreneurial innovative front, you could be the one driving the connections with each of the companies and pulling these companies into the school. From an established perspective, you could be the one maintaining a conference or a panel that happens within that company or within that school. Sorry. So this is a client of mine that got very involved in his first year. So this is Texas McCombs. This person was in event management. Pre business school, had a GMAT of low 700s, was from a large Southern university, was very involved in the community, and was looking to move into a product management role into a tech company. So from event management, wanted to move into a PM role, and was really looking for how to get involved from a marketing perspective. And so you can see the large list of clubs that this person got involved in. In fact, as it is, women in business groups are growing from an ambassador standpoint or ally standpoint. There's an opportunity for men to get involved in being allies to women in business groups. So let's talk a little bit more about McCombs. So Austin, another great city to live in, and from an employment standpoint, about 63% of Austin's graduates will stay in the Southwest. 13% go out to the West Coast. And when you look at their employment report, you'll see all the names that you'll see at, kind of the big, if you're looking to go to a big firm from a technology standpoint or a consulting standpoint, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft all had significant recruiting out of there. BCG, Accenture, ZS, Kearney, EY, PwC, all these companies are recruiting out of McCombs as well. Kind of key differentiators, on top of kind of these ties to different companies are McCombs focus on energy. So from a renewable standpoint, well, their ties, you can see 11% are coming into the class with an energy background. Sometimes that's renewable. Sometimes that is kind of an oil and gas side looking to move into renewable. If if energy or sustainability from an energy perspective is something that you're interested in, McCombs would be a really interesting school to look at. I also think you're kind of commenting on or noting that about 11% are coming from nonprofit and government. That there is a diversity of people coming into McCombs from a background perspective, really leveraging those skills into technology, consulting, financial services. And really, involvement is a key part of doing at McCombs, kind of the involvement within clubs. And so kind of the highlight here is really looking at how you can get involved at a school to think about how, where the benefit's going to come from. All right, cost. As you might have noticed, as I was going through, I tried to note where the clients I worked with got the scholarships for each of these schools. I think one of the benefits of looking across the spectrum at schools is to have a diversity of choice, both from a program standpoint and from a cost standpoint. And it's something each person, you need to decide how much this is important to you. But the more competitive you are compared to kind of the peers at that school or that class profile, the higher likelihood you are of getting some sort of a scholarship at that program. Now, it's important. I would never advocate someone just applying to a school to apply in hopes of the scholarship. I think what's also very important, and especially kind of beyond the 15 schools are going to look for, is why is this program the right program for you? And so kind of thinking through the ties of what we talked about so far and kind of telling that story. So cost, in aligning yourselves for scholarships, really focusing on where you can add to a community or school, as well as what you are going to learn and how you can talk about that this program is really the right program for you based on the research that you've done and the connections that you've made. So this is a client of mine who, so UCLA he was looking to go into entertainment and management. He actually came to us post kind of as a reapplicant. So had applied the year before with a 760, so a very high GMAT score. I think it's a good example of how a high GMAT score doesn't doesn't overcome everything. It's important to kind of have a story and have a why behind each of these schools as well. His background was a little bit disparate. So it had healthcare, finance, and now wanting to transition into entertainment and management. And through our introspection exercises, we really uncovered a pattern of the arts through his entire history. So, had learned English watching TV. His family had moved to the country at a young age and really learned English by watching TV. Had taken drawing classes all through kind of high school and into college. Did some acting in college. So this was a line that we found and kind of drew through this candidate's story to really show the arts side. And then we were able to highlight the consulting, healthcare consulting, kind of what was learned through consulting and finance, and how pulling those together in entertainment was really the right path for him going forward. So, I think in addition to, he spent a lot of time really getting to know the programs and the benefits of, what Anderson and Stern was the other school that from an entertainment and media perspective was on his list. But so, talking about Anderson, on the West Coast, obviously, there are lots of great schools on the West Coast. But I think Anderson can really be, from an entertainment, media, and technology perspective, really stands out. The other industry that really stands out, I think, for Anderson is real estate. So they have the Ziman Center for Real Estate. While I think Haas can be well known on the West Coast for real estate, Anderson in LA, in that market, is also very strong. And Anderson is really known for their career management center. So really taking the time and getting to know their students and being a strong support along the way. 45% of the graduates stay in kind of the Southern California area, 65% stay in California, and 80% on the West Coast. So, in some of the other C's that we've talked about, community, we talked about moving, using a school and thinking about where you want to be long-term as well. I think, here Anderson can really help also in getting to the West Coast. From a technology standpoint, LA is with Silicon Beach is a growing area in technology. As you see, about 30% will leave Anderson in technology. Amazon and Google each recruited more than 20 people. This is back in 2018. Microsoft was in a 16 to 20 bucket. McKinsey, BCG, E&Y, and PwC, so consulting, all 10 to 15. I think, again, this tying back to the entertainment and media, you've got NBC Universal, Paramount, Disney, and then all hiring 5 to 10 people out of Anderson. We've talked about experiential learning. Anderson has a capstone project. Again, very interesting opportunity to make ties with local industry. There's the AMR, Student Investment Fund. They also have a real estate competition. So again, just highlighting some of the industries that would be worth considering, or you should have Anderson on your list if you are considering. So before we jump into questions, real quick, just how can Stratus help you? Again, just a couple reminders. We have a team-based approach. We have depth of experience across applicants and countries. And I would really love, love getting to know people, understanding their profile, and help thinking through, what is the right suite of schools? How do we get safety, target, and stretch schools? I really encourage you to reach out for a 30-minute conversation, free. We can talk about your profile and figure out what is the right approach for you. So what I want to do now is jump into the chat. And okay. All right. So, okay. So here, what are the best MBA programs for real estate on the East Coast? So I would say, and I was going to highlight the school and another school to consider for real estate. I think 2 come to mind that would be kind of beyond the 15. One is on the cusp, Cornell, as well as UNC is another really interesting school for real estate, and they have a strong real estate program. Let's see, could you please mention some schools that accept a female engineer with 4 years of experience at a French Fortune 500? So I would love to talk to you, Samia. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. Would love to go more into detail. I think that, with a profile as a GRE 321, your quant score being quite high, I think there are, so I think any of these schools would be interesting. If you're looking to go, I would want to understand a little bit more, and if you want to put it in the chat, what you're looking to do post MBA, because I think, again, that's a big differentiator on which program might be the right one to target is where you're looking to go post MBA. So if you want to add that in, I'm happy to follow on that. So Canadian business schools. I thought about putting a Canadian business school in here. That with beyond the 15, it's a little tough if you're there aren't 15 in Canada, but there's some amazing business schools there. I have a client right now. At McGill, who had a really interesting background. His background was in theater, and he really wants to go into consulting. And we really took a storytelling angle for him, and kind of talking about how his background in theater would help move into consulting, and because so much of it is relationship based and kind of telling that story. Also have a client at Ivy, again, another strong consulting school to look at. Just because someone asked us, how do we get a free consultation with you? There's a link here. If you go to Stratus admissions, or if you just type in /consult, there'll either be a button on the page, or you can just go to our website, and there's a big red button on there on how to join in for a consult, and just look for me. So best programs for marketing beyond the top 15. So Emory was one that I talked about. I think in marketing, looking for a good general management program makes sense. USC is another school that I would consider from a marketing standpoint. Again, being in LA or Southern California, on that area, I think that there's a lot of focus at USC from a marketing standpoint. So thinking beyond the 15 on marketing, another school to consider would be Kelly. Indiana Kelly has a very strong general management background, and again, being close to Chicago can be very helpful. You've got Notre Dame in there that's not too far from Chicago as well. Chicago can be known for a little bit of a marketing hub coming out of there. Good schools for search funds. And when Bedell, when you say search funds, if you can give me a little more background on that, on what you mean by search funds. If like a hedge fund, private equity fund, I need a little bit more to answer that one. So obviously an MBA from a top program can help you getting a job, not just in the US, but in other parts of the world. So when you consider an MBA from a top 15 program, how much can it realistically help at least getting your first job if you want to build your career outside the US? So I think kind of in the concept of thinking beyond the M7 or top 10, right? There are some, first looking at the employment report of each school is going to tell you where geographically their graduates are going. I also, in talking about Canadian programs, I think thinking about where you want to be outside of the US and looking at programs in that area as well. So, there are fantastic programs in Europe that have strong placement all around Europe, not just within the country they're in. So you've got LBS, Oxford, Judge, Imperial in the UK that have strong tie and are English speaking that some people are looking for. Most programs, the classes are in English. You got HEC and INSEAD in France, IESA and IE in Spain, Boccini in Italy, IMB in Switzerland. Then you have, again, some of that depends on where you want to go. But I think, looking from a technology standpoint, again, just if looking for the companies that are being recruited, are they global companies? So even if it may be kind of flipping, maybe your first job isn't outside of the US, but looking for a job immediately after at a large company that's going to give you an avenue that allows you to get maybe with your second iteration outside of the US is another way to think about that. So we consider, let's see, obviously an MBA from a top program can help you in getting your job. Oh, I think that's just part of the last one. Sorry. Switching through here. Can it realistically help at least getting your first job if you want? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, that was the same one. Okay. Samia wants to move into technology. So thank you for following up with that. So again, I think the schools that we talked about today from a technology standpoint, and I'll add a couple more, but Tepper from a technology standpoint, Foster from a technology standpoint, I would put UCLA in there with Silicon Beach for technology. The Emory is a school that's growing in technology, and if you're thinking kind of outside of the list that we had today from a technology perspective, again, I would add UNC in there with Research Triangle. You're close to Duke, and maybe University of Illinois. Which is where I went undergrad, but just from an engineering perspective, I think one thing to take a look at is how strong is an engineering program at a school, and because there often is a lot of collaboration between engineering and the business school, and that can really foster technology. It kind of bleeds it over into the business school. How advisable is it for an Indian female underrepresented pool PR and law firm and marketing to apply to schools such as UCLA in round 3? So in general, come on, I'm going to answer this from 2 different angles. If you are applying from outside of the US, it is advisable to apply within round 2, and that's primarily for visa reasons, especially now that visas are taking longer due to kind of COVID and the pandemic. Round 3 tends to be, sometimes it can happen, but schools often ask for international students to apply by round 2 so that there is enough time to be able to get a visa. For national U.S. residents, round 3. So historically, round 3 has been a much smaller round. Most schools, especially beyond the 15, definitely have slots in their round 3. There's something that we call MELT in the industry, which is people that apply in round 1 or 2 to a school. But then maybe are on a wait list at a school that is more preferential to them. They get a spot on the wait list, so that it opens up a new spot at kind of that original school. So a lot of that is happening between round 1 and round 2, and so for domestic candidates, round 3, while it's not something that we suggest as a going in strategy for everyone, there are cases that it can make sense. And historically, round 3 has been a smaller round. Last year with COVID, that was very different. Obviously, round 3 was a very big round, but that was because people have sent dates and have changed requirements and things like that. So is it advisable to start with a PhD after your bachelor's in case of interest in academia? So a PhD, I guess it depends. Again, this is, sorry, Falgun, this is somewhat depending upon what do you want to do. A PhD in business tends to be a little bit different than an MBA. Yes, an MBA is a master's, which is often working towards a PhD, but with an MBA, the goal is often to go into industry as opposed to academia. There are some professors that will come from industry, but it also, often the professors are coming through academia, and so kind of it's different than the MBA route. However, there are masters within each of the business schools that will kind of gear you towards a specific, whether it's business analytics or masters in financial engineering, something like that. Let's see. Sorry, my mouse is the age of 39 to start a full-time MBA a no-go? very strong quant and verbal encore. So I never like to say anything is a no-go. I think there are much fewer people at the age of 39 that are applying to a full 2-year program, mostly because they don't want to take 2 years out of their career at that point in time. I think the biggest question you would need to answer for admissions is, why is now the right time? So why, when you were in your late 20s, early 30s, was it not the right time? And why is now the right time? There are far fewer spots, as we talked about, kind of the 10% above 8 years of experience. With 39, I'm guessing you have close to 20 years of experience. Other things to consider are, with your 20 years of experience, you will be sitting in a classroom with people with 3 to 8 years of experience. I would encourage you to look at and think about part-time or executive programs where you would be sitting in a classroom with people of commensurate experience. So you are giving and receiving kind of from that same conversation. But I'd be happy to talk more in detail about your situation. So Bedell, less capital intensive than PE funds. So looking to go in finance in general, that I think kind of backs this as some more of a micro PE. So, I think programs that jump to mind. I have a client that went to Washington University in St. Louis, who is transitioning into VC. So they have a strong tie into the financial industry there. His goal was to be in St. Louis, so that was a little bit location based. From a finance perspective, I also think UNC is one to take a look at, as well as UCLA, UNC, Charlotte, which is just kind of outside of the Research Triangle, was well known for kind of being the banking capital of the Southeast for a while. That's transitioning to Atlanta a little bit, so you could add Emory to that list as well. But those are, so again, looking for where schools have ties to kind of the finance industry there. So let's see. An Indian male with a 720 GMAT, GPA of 6 out of 10. What to be highlighted in this applicant pool for these schools. So, Joel, I think that, what you want to, what's important to think about is, with your stats, kind of separate from your stats, is what are you looking to gain in an MBA, and why is this the right goal for you? And then finding a school that's going to help you get there. And the reason I say this, and because it sounds kind of like a general statement, is schools want to help you reach your goals. They don't want you to tell them what it is you think they want to hear. They want to know, what do you want to do? And why is their program the right program to help you get there? So I think thinking through what are your strengths. That's kind of what you bring to the table. We talked about this being a gap analysis. Where do you want to be post MBA? And what do you need within a business school program that's going to help you get there? And really identifying schools, connecting with those schools, kind of all along the path. In case you didn't know, and again, the GMAT is only one piece of an application. But I think just because you brought up your demographic of being a male engineer, we tend to see average GMAT scores kind of 20 to 30 points higher of the average for your demographic. So that kind of puts in perspective, just kind of from a competitive standpoint. Again, GMAT is just one piece of the equation. I think, let's see, looking for product management, post MBA, also want a STEM MBA, which, and in all the top, I'm so glad you brought up STEM MBAs. I meant to be mentioning as we went through, all top 25 programs, and got a blog post that's going to be going out on this soon, have some form of a STEM program within their program. And I think, Wisconsin was one of the first that did this. So what is your take on schools like Simon, Cary, and Wisconsin? And so, Mike, in general, I think, what do you see that's interesting in these schools? And I think, each of them is going to have a strong general management program. It's looking at, who is recruiting out of there. Are there companies that you could get excited about that are recruiting out of there? And can they help you get to where you want to be? From a STEM perspective, again, I know Wisconsin, part of their program, they were the first one, I think it was their operations track. So from a STEM perspective, some schools' entire MBA program is a STEM program. And then in some schools, it is a track or a major or a specific concentration that you have to choose while you're there, but that will allow you to have that STEM certification and the eligibility for the 36 months of OPT. So what schools do you suggest for nonprofit, government, impact investing sector? So kind of, again, staying in the beyond the 25, I think that McCombs is a school that has a very strong community reach. UNC, strong community reach. Georgetown, which we haven't talked much about yet, from a government and a nonprofit perspective. Again, a very strong global reach. If you think about Georgetown's undergraduate program, very strong from an international standpoint. And again, that's always something to consider when you're looking at programs. So Fuggle thinks 610 may not help in leading U.S. schools unless you have very good experience. So yeah, I have a tendency to ask kind of, with this 610 at your school, were you first class? Is it second class? To your point that's going to play in. I think this is, again, where looking at your profile compared to kind of the average at a school is something to take into account. So I'm looking to see if you told me what you were hoping to do post MBA. If you could, this is the let's see. So another getting into a PhD after bachelor's with an 8+ GPA is advisable in case of interest of academia. So again, I think if you're looking to get into academia, I think a PhD is a strong route to go. So kind of just separating PhD from business school programs, but I think that the route, while there are some industry leaders that will come back to business school and teach, the most prevalent route to teach would be going through and getting your PhD in a discipline. And again, if you want to reach out, we can talk a little bit more about your specific situation. What schools have the best real estate programs in the Southeast? Again, I mentioned UNC a little bit earlier. I think that Georgia Tech would be an interesting one, primarily because the real estate industry in Atlanta is growing significantly. I think that's a growing program there. Let's see. I think we have time for a couple more. So I have 4+ years working in IT, GPA of 3. I'm planning to move into business strategy. Should I apply for the remaining rounds or wait for spring 22, fall 22 intake? So I think that round 2, so the deadlines for US programs for round 2, and in most of Europe as well, in Canada, or kind of the round before it gets more difficult from an international standpoint, tend to be in the January timeframe. It is the largest round generally. It also has the highest amount of acceptances because it is the largest round. So it is, I think, applying in round 2 for a fall 21 intake is a completely would make a lot of sense for you. It might be doing an assessment on your profile. Is there something, again, not knowing what your test scores are or your community involvement is there something that if you could focus on over the next year, it's going to enhance your profile? Then it might be worth considering, applying to start in fall 2022. Last question there. Many universities are waiving off the GMAT. Is it applicable for Indian students? If a school, and this is a growing list, I can't even keep track of what the list is because it keeps changing. So MIT has offered a waiver, Ross has offered a waiver, and now those are the two that I know of most recently, and there are many schools. So, keeping a watch on their FAQs. If it is true, it is true for everyone. It is not just US based. It is not just a demographic. So to answer your question, if someone is offering a GMAT waiver, it would be applicable for Indian students. Yes. All right. All right, I think my time is up. Reach out, would be happy to answer any other questions in person, and really enjoyed this time. Thank you so much.